I'm Ken Fjord. Last year, I wrote a book for my son entitled The Graysonian Ethic, Lessons for My Unborn Son, in the months before he was born. Once he was born, I published the book on Amazon. He's now a happy bouncing baby, and I've decided to release the audiobook version for free on YouTube. My existential crisis. A long time ago, your father had a major existential crisis. It was after I had spent a long time studying physics. Physics is a really beautiful thing. The world is like clockwork, so you can start with a bunch of knowns and predict how the world will work objectively. The reason we can use mathematics and physics is not because mathematics is a magic spell that twists the world. It is because the world is so dependable that you can use something imaginary and perfect like mathematics to describe it. Because you can use this imaginary thing to describe it, you can use the imaginary ways of twisting those numbers to determine things you could not otherwise. Using this ability to predict the universe, you can engineer outcomes. And that is how technology is born. After this, I started getting into the softer parts of my education, ethics and philosophy, and I figured that if you read enough, you would find the equations that govern living. You could find an objective way to live. Some mathematical equation that gives you the outcome of living a good life. I went through millennia of philosophers, from the Greeks to modern day, and every time I had the same problem. At the first principle stage, philosophers would just make up whatever they wanted. Then they would use the tools of logic to build from there. Even philosophers such as the skeptics ended up eventually just ignoring the problem and making up their set of first principles from whole cloth. I imagined a hypothetical alien species that was completely unlike humans. An alien species that used photosynthesis instead of eating, that reproduced asexually, that was not a social animal, that was biologically immortal. That hypothetical alien could not share values with us humans. Things we value deeply would be completely worthless to them. It would look absurd. I was really depressed for a long time over this. I was searching for that objective truth, and I could not find it anywhere. At that time, I was working in a big city, and after a 12 or 16-hour shift on the weekend, since I worked every Saturday and Sunday, in between my full-time school during the week, I'd ride my bike back to my apartment and I'd pass by the area of town where the prostitutes hung out. And I'd pass by the big bars with giant lines waiting to get in. I wanted to feel like I was somehow superior for choosing my studies and discipline instead of these other life paths. But I knew that was illogical. They were doing what they were doing, and I was doing what I was doing. There was objectively no reason to consider one path more righteous than another. That alien would find no difference between me and anyone else. It seemed like my toiling was meaningless. What was further terrifying is the idea that our little ball of dust would someday be swallowed up when our yellow dwarf becomes a red giant. Everything humanity ever created will be bathed in atomic fire for trillions of years. The reality of it just made me feel small and meaningless. What broke me out of the depression was sitting in class one day, listening to my old teacher talking about hiking in Kenya. He was this nerdy, scrawny guy, and hearing that, I was very impressed with his story. I thought it was amazing that this scrawny guy teaching a course had done something incredible like that. That was when I realized something. I did not need some objective equation to know I was amazed. There is no objective value that exists outside of being a human being. There are only the values we hold as individual human beings. That does not make our values any less real or meaningful to us. From there I did what all those other philosophers had done, and I started to take stock of fundamentally what I valued. One of the things I found I value is making real, tangible things that last and bring something valuable to the world. Having the skills to turn something useless into something meaningful is thus a virtuous thing, and living in an age where more than ever before, you can learn about skills basically for free, and materials you would struggle to find before the internet are a click away. Even if they are not core survival skills or anything, there is value in knowing how to do things. It is part of going out and doing amazing things. The skill to do mundane things is the first step. As you grow up, you will be exposed to many ideas. You should strive to see as many of those ideas as you can, both ideas you agree with and ideas you disagree with, to get a broad base. The more you can see of humanity's best ideas, the more of them you can accept or reject. Understand that your opinions are not set in stone, and things you believe are very important can change in a heartbeat because circumstances change or your viewpoint on them changes. Having a broad base, being well-read, being a resident in the world and seeing what the world has to show you will help you with the next step. Without context, your viewpoint will always be narrow. If you only accept one person or group's viewpoint uncritically, then you will just be controlled, and you won't be able to be in control of your life. There are a lot of forces that want you to be casting your eyes outward, so they can choose for you what's of value and what is not. This can be valuable at some points because you can see different perspectives and you can decide whether to integrate those perspectives into your own. But finding your own first principle values is an introspective, meditative, contemplative journey. The world and everything you see leaves its mark on you as you pass through it, and that is where it gets a chance to affect you. For this exercise, you are trying to shut out the outside world and look into yourself, alone. You have to try to push others' opinions out, because this is a personal journey. Think about a lot of things. What fundamentally impresses you? What fundamentally disgusts you? What fundamentally makes you deeply happy? What fundamentally makes you deeply upset? Thinking about these things that get reactions out of you, try to think about the themes these different things have, the reasons why they make you feel the way they do. Eventually you will make it to a basic idea, a word that describes the thing you deeply cherish or reject about these situations. It is going to be different for everyone because everyone's life is different. Once you know what it is you value fundamentally, then it is time to apply the practice of philosophy as a fundamentally structured method of thinking to your fundamental values, and that is where you end up with your own personal value system that has been vetted and is internally consistent. You go through and try to find logical fallacies or inconsistencies and figure out ways to work through those inconsistencies. You will likely take things you have already derived and apply logic to come up with totally different things further down the line. Make sure you give everything the gut check. Just because it is logical does not mean it is correct. You can use pure logic from first principles to lead to places you do not agree with. Then comes the hardest part. You know what you value, and you have built a vetted and internally consistent value system. Then you must go out and live it. The amazing thing about this is that, if you succeed, then you can always wake up and look at yourself in the mirror proudly. Every person has faults and flaws, and nobody can be everything, and anyone who tries to say differently is selling something. But if you live your core values, then you can accept those faults and flaws because you know you are proud of yourself. We have limited resources in our life. We cannot do everything or even most of the things we want to do. If we just act without thinking, though, we might grow old and find we are disappointed in ourselves for not living up to our standards. That we have pursued things we do not really care about or things that weren't actually something we care about and it is actually someone else's ideals. That we spent a lot of time and effort on things we only did because we were going with the flow. By figuring out what matters to you, and by living according to your own compass, you are much less likely to have to go through what I did. And you can always look in the mirror and be proud of yourself even when things get hard. Thanks for listening to this chapter of the Graysonian Ethic, Lessons for My Unborn Son. If you like the book and would like a physical copy or an electronic copy, please look it up. It's available on Amazon around the world. Barring that, please like and share with others. I'll be releasing one chapter every week, so if it hasn't been completely released. If you're interested in hearing more, you can subscribe to see when I post additional chapters.